Coyote and the Dene, and on the national homeland of the Red River Métis. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Before I turn it over to Dr. Rapat, I'm just going to have my own reflection of Henry and the impact he had in my life. I was in the MRC program at the time for the clinician investigator stream, and I had been in the States for 3 years on what could be a 3 to 6 year program, and was trying to come back, and the CIHR program said, no, you have to stay another year. So I stayed a 4th year, and actually it was a good year to stay, but then I wanted to come back. And the program said, no, we want you to stay a 5th year. And I said, okay, guys, no, my family wants to come home. And so the dean at the time, Nick Antonison, said, look, just come home, which meant foregoing the second part of the CIHR Clinician Scientist program. And so with that, I did, but Nick reached out to Henry and he said, look, we've got this guy who's well-trained in the US. We really think he's worth investing in. Would you give us support from the President's Fund from MRC for a year while we figure things out? So he did. Henry actually funded me with a salary award through the President's Fund of the MRC, which got me to come back here, because at the time we were also looking at other possibilities. And then I was very able to get an MRC fellowship afterwards for the next 5 years. So in the end of the day, I think I got more funding out of the program going via Henry than doing it through the CIHR or the MRC program at its time. So I think really what that speaks to is Henry's vision to investing in those that have been invested in, and really looking to support junior faculty as they come on board and having the careers that they were hoping to have. So really without Henry's support in that early time, and through a time of turmoil actually with me and my family, I don't think I would have still been in Winnipeg doing what I'm doing. So I owe a lot to Henry and his vision that he had, not just for myself, but what he's really done across the country and internationally. So with that personal reflection, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Jackie Rapat from the Rady Faculty of Health Sciences, our Vice Dean, Academic Affairs, who will be our MC today. So Jackie.
Thank you, Dr. Nickerson. It's wonderful to see friends and family, colleagues here and online to honor one of Canada's most brilliant and distinguished scientists who passed away on April 30th at the age of 90. Henry Friesen was born in Morden, Manitoba in 1934. He earned a medical degree here at U of M in 1958, then trained as an endocrinologist in Boston. In 1965, he was appointed to McGill University and Royal Victoria Hospital. After returning to Winnipeg in 1973, he served as professor and head of the University of Manitoba Physiology Department and professor of medicine until 1991. He went on to serve as distinguished professor emeritus. One of Dr. Friesen's greatest achievements was isolating and purifying the hormone prolactin. Following this breakthrough, he helped to develop a drug treatment for infertility that aided thousands of women in having children. He authored more than 460 publications in the field of endocrinology and served on the editorial board of many journals. He also played a central role in transforming health research funding here in Canada. He was president of the Medical Research Council of Canada and championed its transformation into the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, or CIHR, as most of us know it. He served for 5 years as the founding chair of Genome Canada, the federal government's lead corporation supporting genomics research. In 1998, University of Manitoba awarded Dr. Friesen an honorary doctorate. The university also recognized his achievements through the creation of the Henry G. Friesen Endowed Chair in Metabolic and Endocrine Diseases. He was honored with many other awards and appointments, including Officer of the Order of Canada and Companion of the Order of Canada, and received honorary doctorates from 8 universities. In 2001, Dr. Friesen was inducted into the Canadian Medical Hall of Fame, and 4 years later, the Friends of CIHR established the Henry G. Friesen International Prize in Health Research. In 2017, Dr. Friesen was appointed a Distinguished Fellow of the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences, the highest honor awarded by the Academy. It's humbling for all of us to acknowledge his pioneering contributions to health research, from his groundbreaking laboratory work to his national leadership roles. So now I'd like to ask Dr. Ian Dixon, head of University of Manitoba Department of Physiology and Pathophysiology, to say a few words.
Thanks, Jackie. I think a lot has been said about Henry over the years, and certainly in the last few weeks about his professional achievements. So my comments are rather more personal. I knew Henry as my own department head. He served from 1973 to 1991 as the head of physiology, and he made, people often say that he made an indelible mark on the faculty, but with our particular department, he really did change and streamline and instill, I should say, kind of the basic framework for which I try to adhere to, and helped us all achieve excellence, particularly in our teaching and research. Henry's went on to do bigger and better things, of course, moving to Ottawa in 1991, just when I was coming back from the U of Toronto. At that time, I kept up with him, and we often communicated, even though I was a lowly PDF at that time. He took the time to chat. We had a lot in common. We were both from rural Manitoba. He from Morden. I've got a farm near Morris, Manitoba, which I still have. And so he was easy to relate to, and he was actually quite a nice guy to chat with. And so I would say that, you know, it's funny, Henry excelled in almost anything he did. And he's one of those people that spoke with extreme clarity of thought. And it grabbed me every time, because often very intelligent people will make chit-chat, and he almost never did that. He would ask you what's new, what's up with your life. I'd have to think, well, this, and this. I would go through a checklist, and it reminded me that he forced people to think. And force is a bad word, but he encouraged people to think and use their brains and to put everything in context. And personal note, when Henry came back from Ottawa, we had already moved back. We were living in Linden Woods. And I saw this guy walking down the street. I was mowing the grass one day. And he used to like these really wide rim hats. And I said, Henry? He goes, hi, neighbor. And I said, hi. And we chatted about science and other things. But he never called me Ian ever again. It was always neighbor. And that went on for 25 years. So that kind of gives you an idea of how Henry interacted with people and how he could approach people. So he made a big impact on my life. He basically encouraged me to keep with basic science. He always challenged me by saying, you know, this is good, but I'm sure you can do better. He would say words like that. And you know, I often think of him even in how I run my lab. And when I'm trying to encourage students, I keep a mental model of him and try to employ that for those purposes. So the measure of service that he provided our department to various individuals and our faculty and our country is difficult to fathom, but I'm sure with your help, some of you will get up and give us a better perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your words, Dr. Dixon. Next, I'd like to call upon Dr. Peter Lewis, Professor Emeritus at the University of Toronto and Interim President of Friends of Canadian Institutes of Health Research, to say a few words.
Good morning. Thank you, Professor Dixon and Rapat. Today we're gathered here to celebrate the life of Henry G. Friesen and his many impacts on the development of health research and health policy in Canada. As you've heard, I'm a retired professor of biochemistry from U of T. Currently, I serve as the interim president for the Friends of CIHR, which, like CIHR, celebrates its 25th anniversary this year. As I'm sure most of you know, Henry was co-founder actually of both organizations during the monumental transformation of the Medical Research Council, of which he was president, into the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, and the alumni of the Friends of MRC into the Friends of CIHR. Professor Emeritus Abby Angel, who is with us today, is a founder of the Friends of CIHR and will be following me in this tribute. Back in the late 90s, I remember very well meeting Henry for the very first time at the U of T as he described his vision for expanding the MRC mandate to include all aspects of health research. And at the time, as basic scientists, we were a little skeptical, frankly. But with Henry in his inimitable style, he convinced us all of the value of that transformation. As you know, in 2005, Abby Angel created the Friends of CIHR Henry G. Friesen International Prize in Health Research in recognition of Henry's distinguished leadership, vision, and innovative contributions to health research and health policy. The award, announced each spring, supports an annual lecture or series of lectures by a worthy and accomplished speaker of international status on topics related to the advancement of health research and its evolving contributions to society. The lecture endeavors to reach the broadest possible audience at major centers across Canada. Yesterday, we had the 18th Henry Friesen Prize winner, Professor Gordon Guyatt, who's up there, present his lecture on evidence-based medicine, the 7th so far. Henry would be very proud of this. Last year here in Winnipeg, I met Henry at the 2023 Henry Friesen Prize lecture by Professor Zulfi Bhutta from the University of Toronto Sick Children's Hospital. And it really was a wonderful experience for me to represent an organization that Henry helped create. So on preparing these remarks, I hadn't realized until doing the homework, all of the awards, as you've heard, that Henry has received over his career. It's a totally amazing, very, very impressive list. So I want to, again, acknowledge Henry's major contributions. Thank you, and we'll now turn to the personal tributes, recollections, and relationships, and I will begin with Professor Abby Angel.
Dr. Rapat, nice to meet you. Dean Nickerson, great to see you. It's a joy to be here. This is a tribute to a dear friend and colleague. Much has been said and written about Henry's spectacular contributions in science, in health research policy, and organizational development. In the few minutes I have to speak, I'd like to add some personal reflections to the narrative that spans some 66 years of our friendship and partnership that ultimately guided the launch of Friends of CIHR and the Friesen Prize. In 1960, Henry and I were housemen here together at the Winnipeg General Hospital. Others will remember those days. I was a junior resident and Henry a senior resident in medicine. We were both interested in internal medicine and endocrinology and often made midnight rounds or visited the emergency departments to witness the action. We were eager for experiences in direct patient care, like stitching up a wound that might come in Saturday night, and we did that. This casual, incidental, unsupervised care was permitted in those days. Things have changed. McGill University played an important role in our career development. Based on the personal friendship of Dr. John Gemmell, head of medicine at University of Manitoba, and Douglas Cameron, head of medicine at McGill, Dr. Gemmell helped Manitoba trainees get residency positions in the McGill program. Now, looking at the audience here, a lot of you will remember Dr. Gemmell, but if you approach an audience of students these days, these are strange names that sort of hang around. Charles Hollenberg, another icon of this institution, my future supervisor and mentor, led a stream of Manitobans who trained in the McGill internal medicine program. Participants included Kirk Osterland, John Dirks, Barry Kaufman, Henry Friesen, Abby Angel, Len Morose, Jerry Dolovich, Bob Hoshin, Barry Posner, and Harvey Gaida. This is 1957 to about 1961. And others, of course. Confirmations were based on a handshake, a letter, and a verbal recommendation by Dr. Gemmell. Things have changed since those days. This is an interesting group of people, an interesting cohort that passed through. In later life, what they represented in terms of outcomes were 6 orders of Canada, 1 dean, 5 department heads, 4 division heads, 10 funded research programs, and 10 medals. It's extraordinary when you think back what Manitoba created and delivered to the system in Canada, because it just penetrated the whole system over time. And all this was based on casual relationships, but a selection process that was personal, because John Gemmell actually selected these people. What did he select? He selected a chief resident, gold medalists, leaders, accomplished people in science, and people he liked. Quite amazing. Henry and I at McGill. Henry and I collaborated briefly to prepare anti-adipose tissue antibodies. We purified rat fat cell plasma membranes as antigen and injected rabbits to generate antiserum. The purified rabbit immunoglobulin had no apparent effect on rat growth or microscopically on tissues, particularly adipose tissue, so we abandoned this effort to find a novel treatment of obesity. It didn't work, superseded by Ozempic. Henry and I also took up badminton as a recreational pastime. You'll be interested to know that he was very quick on his feet, but I usually won. Following our games, we often went to Le Caveau restaurant on Mountain Avenue for French onion soup, Caesar salad, and a beer. Henry had a Diet Coke. And this is our light lunch. We enjoyed these hours immensely. Very personal, very memorable. Getting back to the Department of Medicine at McGill, they were very supportive of their trainees, young faculty and young faculty members. We were encouraged to attend scientific meetings, especially the Atlantic City Tri-Society gatherings in May. Travel costs were subsidized up to $75 on presentation of receipts, so a number of us pooled resources, rented a car, and drove to Atlantic City. Henry was a driver, and he was a speedster, so we always arrived in record time. Accommodations were tight because of the crowd, so we drove around to find a modest motel and shared a room. The book of abstracts was thicker than our telephone directory, and we pre-selected the talks of interest. We prepared notes so that we'd be ready to report on important talks on our return to Montreal. This doesn't happen anymore, but that was a ritual that inculcated us into understanding and appreciating the science that was sort of evident in the day. For all our efforts, Henry and I rewarded ourselves with dinner at Hackney's seafood restaurant for a £1.50 lobster or a spectacular sub sandwich at the White House restaurant that still stands today. In 1996, I spent 6 months of administrative leave in Ottawa at MRC as scholar in residence. Henry created this position, from this vantage point, we established an organization called Alumni and Friends of MRC to serve as an informal, soft advocacy group of former and current grantees. Annual meetings of this group were organized in Ottawa, and in conjunction with other societies, we held roundtables related to the advancing the concept of an institute structure. And Henry's was a marvel at this, in this regard, the way he embraced, constrained, and elaborated on different organizations and institutions at the time to spread the word and convince folks about the institute concept. In 2000, the Canadian Institutes of Health Research was formally established by Henry, with Alan Bernstein as its inaugural president. Alumni and Friends of MRC changed its name to Friends of CIHR and refined its goals and purposes to promote the ideals of CIHR to attract and support young trainees in the health sciences. In 2005, we established the Henry G. Friesen International Prize in Health Research to commemorate Dr. Friesen's distinguished leadership, vision, and innovative contributions to health research and health research policy. Now, I had the distinct pleasure and honor of chairing the adjudication of 15 of the 19 Friesen Prize winners over time. I can attest to the objectivity and excellence of the selection process, which appointed the most outstanding scientists, educators, and organizational leaders in Western biomedicine. Henry was a dispassionate observer and did not interfere with the selection process at all. He took great pride in the quality of the laureates that bore his name and understood and anticipated the impact of this group of outstanding individuals in Canadian biomedicine over time, because all of them visited 5 to 6 institutions during the year and exposed themselves to the leadership and studentship of each of these institutions. So thousands and thousands of people were exposed in their early years to the Friesen Prize program. Henry attended many of the Friesen Prize gatherings in Ottawa, which he enhanced by being there. This is a significant impact of Henry personally in the process. He had an aura of dignity that commanded respect. Deputy ministers of health always welcome our delegation with a private audience, followed by an hour-long roundtable with program directors. Henry was treated as a celebrity. Henry was accorded the same respect and deference nationally from university presidents, deans, and institute directors who regularly contributed to the Friesen Prize program during our annual appeals. I was privileged to receive a call from Henry a few days before he died. He told me he was tired. While Henry's passing was tragic, he gave life and happiness to countless others as a dedicated, creative scientist. He will be remembered. I miss my dear friend and colleague. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Angel, for those words and stories and personal tributes. Very meaningful. Next, I would like to welcome Dr. Brian Postal, University of Manitoba, Dean Emeritus of the Max Rady College of Medicine and the Rady Faculty of Health Sciences.
So
I'm about half a generation behind most of these gentlemen. And I was in medical school, starting medical school in 1972. And of course, Henry was recruited in 1973. Now, second year medicine, and I won't go through all of his accomplishments, that's been done. You barely knew what prolactin was, but it seemed pretty important. And I think as medical students, we thought it was very cool that we had in our midst a professor of this caliber. Now, I was involved with Henry not in terms of doing research, but we'd cross paths on committees or more casually, and he was always remarkably generous and kind. So he'd ask how things were going, and he'd comment on things he was observing, what you were doing as a department head or as a dean, and would always say, "You're doing a marvelous job, just outstanding." And then he'd look you gently in the eye and say, "Try harder." You know, so he set a standard or an idea of excellence that permeated the whole place. And I think in permeating the whole place, he became a fascinating icon to me, because in Manitoba, some of you may have had this experience, certainly I have, it's sometimes hard to get attention because you go to a meeting and one of the larger universities presents something they've done and are very proud of it, and then you quietly say, "Well, we did that 8 years ago." And they don't quite believe you, or if they believe you, it's more like, "Well, that's because you're small and you can move things along and you don't have the obstacles." But Henry, I think, set the example to our young people that you could achieve excellence, that you could find a place, that you could, I think he validated this university in many ways because he was so prominent on the national stage and so remarkably well respected. So I think that validation goes a long way to our young researchers, young students, and our clinician scientists to say we are capable of excellence, we should expect excellence, and that's part of a strong tradition here that we need to continue to respect. So with that, I'd say it's obvious he was good for science, he was good for research, he was good as a mentor, he was good for this university, and he was good for this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Postal, for those words. Our next speaker this morning is Dr. Arnold Neymark, Medicine Dean Emeritus and President Emeritus of the University of Manitoba. Welcome, Dr. Neymark.
I am wearing the Henry Friesen style jacket, consisting of buttons that come off from time to time. And part of my association with Henry was trading extra buttons for our respective blazers. And I thought appropriate to wear here. Now, let's get into first of all, my highlights of 70 years as a friend of and a collaborator with Henry Friesen. The friendship began when we were near contemporaries as medical students. Albie has already talked about that. Our paths crossed frequently during our respective periods of clinical clerkship. Unsatisfied with the range of cases we were seeing on the so-called public wards, we managed to persuade Ms. Smith, the head nurse on A6 in the General Hospital, to let us see the charts of interesting private cases. This was no small feat, given that Miss Smith was purported to have smiled only once in her life, sometime in the 1940s. I was convinced Henry's serious and quieting demeanor did the trick. After graduation, we went our separate ways, but our paths crossed often enough for me to learn about the evolution of Henry's status as a remarkable scientist. I'd taken over the headship of our Department of Physiology and had started the process of reorienting it. And by the time I was appointed the Dean of Medicine, we had increased the lab bench strength of the department substantially and established its standing as a leading department in Canada. The notion that Henry essentially created a decent Department of Physiology by coming and doing his magic is not what actually happened. What actually happened is we developed a strong Department of Physiology. It was a leading department in Canada. I was head of the Association of Departments of Cardiology and of Physiology in Canada at the time, and so on. However, I was appointed as Dean of the faculty because of interests. I was interested in the important changes that happened to faculty as a whole. And I knew that we needed to solidify what we had achieved in physiology, and it was no secret that Henry Friesen had all of the attributes you would want to have as a leader of that process. And I was under pressure from senior colleagues to appoint a successor quickly, but I was determined that the opportunity would not be missed to appoint a successor who could solidify and expand the program. Didn't take long for me to conclude that Henry Friesen had all of the attributes that were needed, and this included a long 3-year negotiation period, during which we had to essentially ensure that a move to Manitoba would result in the least possible disruption of the research activities. So at some point I imagined the experiments being conducted in a moving van converted to mobile laboratories as they traveled to Winnipeg from the east. The scope and diversity of our collaboration after became head was far too expensive for me to go through. There were a huge range of matters over which we worked closely together, as he did with others in the faculty. People have touched upon his influence not only on the Department of Physiology, but the faculty as a whole, to which I agree wholeheartedly. One of the main developments that Henry and I worked on was the move to create a research enterprise at St. Boniface Hospital. And that link was established decades before he went off to Ottawa for a medical research council, and it was inevitable that as qualities as a leader would be recognized nationally and internationally. This led to what I refer to as the parking lot consultation. We were both sitting in my car. Henry said, "I have a question." I said, "What's that?" He said, "I have been offered the opportunity to go to the Medical Research Council as leader. What do you think about that?" And I said, well, two reactions. First of all, you would do a terrific job with your hands behind your back. But the other thing you have to deal with is the Ottawa syndrome. with all the agencies, all the competitions, all of the vying for recognition and so on, getting to know who to talk to and how is something that's going to use a lot of your time. And if you feel that's possible for you, by all means, I would say, take it. And he did. And he proved that he didn't need any teachers in terms of how to work with the folks in Ottawa. And he developed an interesting special connection to people who what I call the influencers, not necessarily the deputy minister and the bureaucracy, but the people who influenced them. So he knew and became friends with Eddie Goldenberg, Chrétien's chief advisor and influencer, and others like that. And he developed an interest and I think an affection for some of these people because they were operating in a way that was new to him, but that he could respond to with special effect. So Henry and the MRC, we talked about it a lot after he got there, and I suggested to him that the problem of not being separated in thought about the other agencies, that if all the councils got X%, that's what MRC was going to get. And the question was, how do we set the MRC apart from all of that? And so he took the step of essentially saying, let's get a group together to evaluate the MRC, international group, and so on. Everybody in the agency business thought he was crazy, that he would invite something without knowing what the outcome would be. And he asked me to chair that group. And we produced a report from which he was able to start to set the MRC a bit apart from the other things in the Ottawa mentality of how they saw councils and research councils as a group. And as a result of that, it became clear that there needed to be a new approach to the appreciation of how much there was in the Act for MRC that allowed it to get into areas of social sciences and so on, factors affecting health that had nothing to do with the other councils. And so that became, to some extent, the baseline for what do you do next and how do you demark. Well, the path to the CIHR is well known to everybody, and that path was strewn with what I call the clouds of consultation that Henry was a master of. He'd get Aubrey talking to Arnold, to talking to so-and-so, and then he'd say to Aubrey, if you ever talk to so-and, talk to him about X, or see him about X, or would you lend him a hand with that? And then this multiplied. So he made a reality of his basic precept of selling the case that the MRC was not in Ottawa. It was in every medical school and teaching hospital and laboratory in Canada. And that was the MRC, not Ottawa. And this demarcation process was remarkable, and I've always said this was going to be his method for moving forward. Well, I want to stop there. The results of what he did in Ottawa, we talked about for a long time. We worked together a bit on what to do about Genome Canada. he persuaded me to let self stand for appointment as the founding director of the Canadian Health Services Research Foundation, the Canadian Biotechnology Advisory Committee, and then there was the return to Manitoba when all of that had come to fruition, and he became a senior fellow of the Center for Advancement of Medicine here. And in that role, we shared an office and talked about all kinds of interesting issues and things that to be done, served on committees and visits to other universities for councils. He was a senior guide and influence who used his connections in Ottawa and his standing in Ottawa to champion important Manitoba initiatives, the National Microbiology Laboratory, the recruitment of someone like Frank Plummer to run it rather than a non-science administrator, which was the usual Ottawa way to do this, especially in Winnipeg. So I visited Henry in hospital as the twilight of his days flickered to an end. I still haven't processed the effect of that visit, marked by us barely clutching of our hands. But I do know that what remains of my own twilight, grateful memory will always speak to me of Henry and all he has meant to me and to the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those words, Dr. Neimark. Now I'd like to call on Dr. Grant Pierce, Distinguished Professor Emeritus of Physiology and Pathophysiology, for a few words.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Friends of CHR and the faculty for the opportunity to be here and say a few words. I'm thrilled at this unusual opportunity to be one of the younger members of a panel. This doesn't happen anymore. You should know Dr. Henry Friesen. If you don't know Henry Friesen or didn't have the opportunity to meet with him, and you live in Winnipeg, you missed a tremendous opportunity, a great experience. Henry was a very humble and unusually modest man, which is probably why, if you don't know him, that's why you don't know him. He was a proud Manitoban, a distinguished professor at the University of Manitoba, and unusually dedicated to his home city of Winnipeg. I think we've all heard about his national and international accomplishments from the previous speakers. But I wanted to focus on something a little bit different. I wanted to focus on him being an incredibly influential figure in this city. He was instrumental in bringing the National Microbiology Laboratory, the only level 4 facility in Canada, and one of only a few in the world, to Winnipeg, and situating it just down the street. I remember him gathering a bunch of us scientists. I had no idea what I was doing, but if he told me I should go, then we go. Dr. Dalla, Dr. Single, a few of us. And we all marched down to City Hall, and he went there to show his support for its placement in Winnipeg. I'm not sure that we made any impact, but we sat up there and we listened to all the politicians do their thing. He successfully then lobbied in Ottawa vigorously for it to come to Winnipeg. And it's been a huge impact here on this city. He was a primary figure in the establishment of the Albertson Research Center at St. Boniface Hospital, where I spent most of my career. This research center grew into one of the finest cardiovascular and nutritional research groups in the country, and its placement at St. B is arguably why the entire clinical cardiovascular program is now primarily found at St. B. Henry Friesen did that too. Henry was the chairman of the Department of Physiology, as you've heard, within this faculty of medicine. It was called the Department of Physiology at that time. Within this faculty of medicine for decades in the 70s and 80s. And I am indebted, and my family is indebted, because he hired me. That was my first job. At that time, it was ranked not as one of the best in Canada. It was ranked in the top 5 in all North America. It was outstanding. Henry organized it, recruited for it, and led it with a quiet but firm authority, with the help of Miss MacDonald. I don't know if any of you remember Miss MacDonald. Henry created the CHR, which provides the research funding for many here in the audience and at this university. At the time, he transitioned it from the Medical Research Council of Canada. And I was on a major, he stuck me on a major, he invited me to be on a major committee, and I was a little nobody. I was a young, probably assistant professor at the time, and Alan Bernstein was on the committee, and a whole bunch of bigwigs, and little old me on there. And we made some major decisions at the time. One of them, the biggest one, was the change from 1 application time to 2 in a year. That had a major impact that we didn't realize, but the major impact was it decreased the success rates across the country. It's a mathematical certainty, but it created huge, Henry was already under huge pressure that nobody was getting grants and there wasn't enough money and all the rest of it. And this just accentuated that even more. So I had a very close opportunity to watch him as he went across the country. And at that time, there was no CHR or no possibility or perspective of CHR. And I watched the incredible stress and negativity that he was working under. It was really unprecedented, people yelling at him and telling him all sorts of stuff. But he was calm, he was fair, he was always positive, and incredibly enough, he ignored the huge stress that he was facing from scientists all over this country. It was really something that I took when I went into my small positions administratively, that I took to heart, because he taught me so much about how to handle difficult situations. Henry Friesen is someone you should know, because Henry Friesen continues to influence your life in medical science to this day, and will continue to serve as an ideal role model for clinicians, scientists, and administrators for a long, long time. I could finish here, but do I have just 2 minutes for a humorous excerpt? So a long time ago, when the Albertson Research Center was just starting, we had an open house. And so we had all the public coming in, and we were trying to promote science and show the public different things. And we had high school students who came in. And Bill Peters was our communication guy, and he decided he was going to do one of these hands-on experiments that people could interact with. And it was a pumpkin. And he had a pumpkin, and you had to have a probe that went into the pumpkin, but you weren't looking at where the probe went. You had to look at a screen, and so intuitively it was difficult to do. But there was an audience, there were chairs in front, so you could watch this person as his probe went through this pumpkin, and it was like going through a brain. Henry had visited us from MRC at the time and decided to come down for a visit to the research center. And so he decided, they said to him, well, Dr. Friesen, would you like to do this as well? Henry was a great sport. And he said, yeah, okay, I'll do this. So he got in there, and he was having a difficult time with this probe. There was all these students at the back, high school students, who were sitting back there heckling the president of MRC, saying, no, you don't have that right. You move it to the left. What are you doing? Come on, let's go. And everyone was laughing. And he had this cute little smile on his face. It was typical Henry as he was trying to work his way through a pumpkin. But that was Henry. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pierce. Our next speaker is Dr. Lauren Terrell, Distinguished Professor of Medical Microbiology and Immunology and former Dean of Medicine and Dentistry at the University of Alberta.
Thank you very much. Let me just say that it's been a pleasure just listening this morning to people talk about Manitoba. I said last night I've always admired Manitoba's leadership in the country, and Jerry Marks, who was my supervisor PhD, used to point to Manitoba quite often as they're doing it right there. And I just want to say it was wonderful last night to come back, and thank you again for the Manitoba Club. Arnold, it's always a great place to visit. Dean Nickerson, members of the Henry Friesen family, Mark, it's a distinct honor to be here today, to have been asked to contribute on some personal interactions and reflections with Henry. By the way, Arnold, you got it exactly right. I was thinking of the people in Ottawa that really and certainly Eddie Goldberg, he interacted a lot with, Ian Shugart, Mark LePage. I mean, he had a number of people that really made things, helped him make things happen. He was a remarkable clinician scientist. And I want to emphasize again the importance of clinician scientists. We've seen them, not enough of them, develop across the country. Far too many people train and then go into practice and disappear. That era of the clinician scientists and what was happening has been hard to recapture, but you see what his research did. He was interested, driven by unmet medical needs, medical problems. He worked on growth hormone and helped get growth hormone into children that lacked it. And that really enhanced growth hormone replacement therapy. His work on prolactin and infertility and reproductive disorders met another major unmet medical need, and developed bromocriptine to treat infertility and help many patients. Again, so oriented to clinician and patient-driven needs. As we've heard, he's recognized for the tremendous work he did in endocrinology, 460 papers, Order of Canada, Canada International Gairdner Award winner, and many others. My interactions with Henry Friesen really began after he was appointed chair of MRC, Medical Research Council in 1991. And just as Dr. Pierce has outlined, there were a lot of difficulties with MRC at that time. And I remember him visiting University of Alberta, and your description was quite true. He was attacked. Things aren't going that well with MRC. And it was, research funding was relatively decreasing relative to the US at that time. And pressures were brought on. And things had to change. And Henry went across the country and heard these attacks, and he then went back and decided he had a vision of how to transform the MRC into the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. I can remember talking with him, and he was talking about, we've got to get institutes of health like the United States. We've got to create these. And he created a new organization with 13 institutes, but more important, he broadened MRC. And there were people against that. But he broadened it to 4 pillars. And we're going to include this broader approach to health research. And I can remember that so well. Lots of resistance. And I was the Dean of Medicine at the University of Alberta in 1999, 2000. I happened to chair the Dean's Council of the Association of Canadian Medical Colleges. So Henry came to me and put pressure on that we've got to get all the deans across the country behind this change from MRC to CIHR. That was a challenge. We had some very opinionated deans at the time. Somebody maybe remember Arnie Aberman and others that, had different opinions. But after many discussions, and we were able to convince the deans that this was the right direction. Great help from another person was Joel Wiener, who was my Associate Dean of Research, but also chaired the Associate Deans of Research of ACMC. And Joel bought into this in a very major way. So he was always grateful for our support at that time. But I would say that the changing and transformation of MRC to CHR was the right direction. And as Alan Bernstein said recently in a tribute to Henry, these were many difficult national conversations, and there were disparate views. But Henry listened and kept his eye on the ultimate goal. And this was achieved by superb leadership, vision, perseverance, and humility. He just kept on it. The successful transfer was a transformative contribution to Canadian health research. His vision didn't stop with the creation of CHR. And what did surprise me a little bit at that time was he was also planning another major organization. And I used to think, how's this going to work with CHR to create another organization, Genome Canada? But he recognized the importance of the human genome and how it was going to be critically change medicine. And he realized that Canada was behind. And he said, we've got to create this organization because Canada's got to be a major player in the human genome. And that was the type of vision that he had. And he created Genome Canada with a budget of $160 million. By the way, MRC went from $250 million to $500 million when it was created, and Alan Bernstein took it over. And the Genome Project, $160 million. And Canada would not be left behind in the human genome race. We were a participant, and as Ron Morton, who was very much involved in that, said, Henry was one of a kind at exactly the right time. And it was the perfect time to do that, and he did it. I also want to touch bases on Henry's contribution to a third major Canadian organization, the Gairdner Foundation. Let me say that the Gairdner Foundation was established by James Gairdner in 1957 with a donation of $500,000 James Gairdner was quite a guy. He was an athlete, he had many things, but he actually got arthritis and got some remarkable help. When I look back, I think he got put on steroids and his arthritis improved. And he wanted to make reward scientists who had helped biomedical research and health research. And a key thing was he said that this will be not a Canadian prize. This is for international, the very best in the world. And that has given Gairdner a presence that is known worldwide. But I got involved with Gairdner at the time, a bit on the board, and we had an endowment of $3 million. Our prizes were $30,000, and we realized this was not going to be sustainable. And in fact, the Gairdner family ran that at the time, and there was serious discussion that the 50th anniversary, this started in 1957, that 2007, and going towards that might be the last of the Gairdner, and would have to wind it up. But people involved realized how important the Gairdner Foundation is to Canada and its reputation worldwide. And Henry and John Dirks really lobbied the Canadian government to get the money to maintain the Gairdner Foundation, and they got a $20 million gift. And that really allowed the Gairdner Foundation to continue to where it is today. And without Henry, that would not have happened. Without John Dirks, it wouldn't have happened. Both of those people really worked hard, and I saw it happening, and it was so really, truly important. I love two organizations in Canada. I love the Gairdner, which I served on the board for, chair of the board for about 12 years, and many times interacted there with Henry. I got to say, we changed the Gairdner from a family foundation to a national foundation and started taking the Gairdner Award winners across the country in a week, third week of October. It was really a celebration of science in Canada through the Gairdner and its activities. So there was a lot of transition that went on and some issues with the family and all of these changes, but I would phone up Henry and he would give me some key advice. Keep going, keep working on this, and it was very important. So I just want to say that those three organizations, CIHR, Genome Canada, the Gairdner Foundation, owe so much to Henry Friesen. It would have been a tragedy to lose the Gairdner. As you know, they're a precursor to the Nobel Prize in many cases. And 102 of the Gairdner winners have gone on to win Nobel Prizes. And internationally, it's really recognized, its importance. So getting the money for that was very important. I did ask Anne McClellan one time about Henry Friesen. Anne McClellan was a deputy prime minister and minister of health and minister of energy and minister of justice. And Anne McClellan said, Henry Friesen was one of my favorite people who come in to visit. But I also knew every time he came that he was going to walk out with more money than I ever expected him to get. And it's exactly true. So it was a blessing and a curse when he came to visit. In 2008, he was the chair of the Gairdner Foundation, and he stepped down and he really appointed me, said, you're going to be the chair of the Gairdner Foundation following him, and I really enjoyed working with the Gairdner and serving as the chair of the board. But without Henry, this wouldn't have happened. In conclusion, Henry's legacy to Canada includes the critically important CIHR, the critically important Genome Canada and its effects, and the Gairdner Foundation. Thank you very much, Henry, for all you've done for Canada. Thank you.
Thank you for those words, Dr. Terrell. And now I'll call on Henry and Joyce Friesen's son, Dr. Mark Friesen, to say some words. Mark is a clinical resource pharmacist for adult critical care at Health Science Centre and a nil salaried assistant professor in the College of Pharmacy here at the University of Manitoba.
Thank you, Upa. So if I'm to have one of the last words among these distinguished speakers today, I would like it to be words of gratitude. On behalf of the Friesen family, my mom, Joyce, my wife, Marianne, my sons, Zach and Sam, and my sister, Janet, I would like to thank Peter Lewis and Abby Angel and the Friends of CIHR for organizing this wonderful event, and to Peter Nickerson and the Rady Faculty of Health Sciences for hosting us all today. I also want to thank each and every one of the speakers for their moving tributes to my father. It has been a source of comfort and encouragement to our family to feel the love and support of many of his colleagues throughout my dad's hospitalization, his passing, and right up until today. And I would be remiss if I did not give thanks to his colleagues from the Department of Physiology who visited him while he was in hospital, including Drs. Neymark, Dr. Dixon, Drs. Dalla, Kirschenbaum, and Pierce. And he also my dad reached out to a number of his colleagues via phone in his last days, including Abby Angel and John Dirks. Your care meant so much to him and also to us. When I was able, while my dad was in hospital, to get the word out to Dad's colleagues from his time in Ottawa, I began to receive many touching emails to my dad, and it was my privilege to read these messages to him in his final days, which he so appreciated. I'd like to read 3 of these excerpts today. From Alan Rock, the Minister of Health in the Chrétien years, he wrote, "Your father remains one of my heroes, a person of genuine humility, great integrity, and enormous talent, who devoted his life to the service of others, and whose fresh and innovative ideas literally changed our country for the better." From David Johnson, the former Governor General, wrote, "The Japanese have an award entitled a National Treasure. Were there a Canadian equivalent, you would be the first inductee. In your inimitable leadership, you have inspired so many to find the courage to act boldly and wisely. Henry, one of the great privileges of my lifetime have been to come to know you as a friend and be inspired by you." And from Gary Goldberg, a founding and ongoing supporter of the Friesen Prize. He wrote on the day of the federal election of how he saw in my dad the qualities we should look for in all our elected leaders. He said, "Henry, you have been also a guide and inspiration to me. I've tried to develop some of the skills I've observed you have, particularly when chairing a board meeting. You've always invoked and demonstrated clarity, eloquence, fairness, thoughtfulness, inclusiveness, openness to unconventional ideas, patience, and resolute leadership. To each of these and many others, my dad would offer his words of gratitude as I read the emails. He was already in his weakened state, but he was able to say, "Thank you, Alan. Thank you, David. Thank you, Gary." And today I would add my words to all of those people. Thank you as well. Lastly, I'd like to thank my dad personally today for 3 gifts that he gave me related to his work. 1 that will be obvious and 2 that may be less so. Firstly, the more obvious one, he modeled for me what a career of excellence in the health sciences could look like, dedicating his talents in service to and for the good of others. In so doing, he gave me the gift of an example to follow. But as has been spoken today, he combined this excellence with genuine humility and gentleness. And because of this, the second gift relates to, unlike the children of perhaps many a successful physician, I never felt any pressure from him for me to follow exactly in his footsteps and specifically become a physician. He gave me the gift of freedom for me to find my own path. And he was unstintingly supportive of me once I did make the choice to pursue a career in pharmacy. I'm told he referred to me as his favorite pharmacist. And over the years, I was greatly honored to have him consult me on medication-related issues, up to and including during his final days in the hospital. Lastly, my dad modeled for me that one could be both a person of scientific rigor and of deep Christian belief. He saw nothing inconsistent between the two, but rather it was his faith that was at the core of his motivation to use his talents for the good of others. And hence I was given the gift of faith in that respect. So for these three gifts, an example of excellence to follow, a freedom to choose my own path, and a faith-filled life, I thank you, Dad, and thank you all.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of today's speakers for your amazing tributes to Dr. Henry Friesen. Really highlighted, I think, the remarkable personal and professional accomplishments in such an amazing way, and really the legacy that remains. So it's really great to hear from everyone. So to conclude our program, I'd like to invite Dr. Jude Azana, University of Manitoba Professor of Immunology and Vice Dean Research here at the Rady Faculty of Health Sciences, to wrap us up.
Thank you, Jackie. I really want to start by thanking the Friends of CIHR. Peter, thank you so much for reaching out and letting us amend our itinerary and our program to accommodate this very important event. I also want to thank Dr. Gayad for being flexible with us. We had things already planned for his visit, but we have to move things around to really accommodate this. And I would like to thank all the speakers. Dr. Tarrell, thank you for flying in from Edmonton. It was really a pleasure to have you last night. And Obi, and Grant, in all the speakers, Dean Postal. You guys can also see how important that this individual is to us. We have three deans here. We have Dean Nermark, we have Dean Postal, and we have the current dean, Dr. Nicholson. I really don't know Dr. Friesen very well. I just met him last year at the dinner, but I've come to realize how important and how great this individual is. And I really want to thank him for what he has done to research enterprise and the ecosystem in Canada. And Mark, please accept our condolences. And I want to close by really thanking Jackie for stepping up at the last minute to MC this event. And finally, I want to make special thanks to Carla and to Zaira. These are amazing individuals that through this time were able to be so flexible and to accommodate all the late changes and everything that kept coming until yesterday. And they've done a spectacular job. So thank you so much. And while we go back to the itinerary of Dr. Gayat meeting with students and other faculties, we still have coffee and muffin at the concourse, and we can go in and mingle. Thank you so much. This concludes our event. Thank you.